us back, to hold us, tried to hold us back.
We will be here forever. Do you understand?
Hey, it's Shan here. This week, I catch up with MC, producer, co-founder of the music label Elephant Tracks, founding member of the culturally significant Australian hip-hop band The Herd. It's Tim Levinson, also known as Urthboy. Tim and I have a long conversation about his life so far. He goes deep on what it was like growing up in the Blue Mountains, which is an area inland of Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. Tim shares about his early days, writing poetry as a child and transitioning into music. We talk about the music industry a little bit, and Tim has an underlying optimism with the future of it, despite the vast array of challenges that, that industry can pose for emerging artists and also, artists such as himself who have maintained longevity in what would be very challenging. So that was really interesting to get his perspective on that, and he speaks really openly and freely. We go on a range of different tangents, but ultimately it just comes back down to what it's like going all in on your dream and chasing your passions. And he's super inspiring, very well spoken, tells a great story, and it was an absolute honor. His lyrics in, his solo music and also the band The Herd have always really resonated with me, very politically driven, and he talks about that as well. And I really feel like the activism that was cultivated in that band really made its mark on Australian culture, especially in the early 2000s. So enjoy getting to know Tim Levinson, aka Urthboy.
Child of the light, styles of the neon belong to a culture destined to rock for eons. Time doesn't exist, shut those cataracts, capture the virtualist. Now, let's get back to what makes things seem forever, whether it's unseen, unheard, or it's 16 again. Not a bother, fill this old man river, kill a floor that gives all. Coming upstream, quiver, sex style,
really
rock drop to the floor, lower to the
as
earth,
an
cause it's a
email
cosmic
name.
shock ball.
And I didn't even think I was going to be an MC. I didn't think I was going to be a rapper. I didn't think I was going to be a musician. Had no future where I was involved in the music industry. But when I did start mucking around with music with friends in our bedrooms, I just went, well, that's the name that I gave the email, and you don't think that there's going to be any consequences for it. One thing leads to another. You put out a little song here and there, then you contribute to a compilation, then you do a solo record, and it's a bit too late to go back. So, I think rather than it being a way of expressing who I am, I think who I am has somehow given meaning to the name that I gave myself, if that makes any sense. Obviously Urthboy kind of has earthy connotations, and being connected to, the environment or something, but that's never been part of, my motivation for the name. It was just random. But I think that maybe in the way that the unconscious or the subconscious tells you something about yourself, maybe there's something in that too.
Seems like it's a really interesting time to be a musician in this country. And post-pandemic, and bands trying to recover from not having any gigs for 2 years, was it?
Yeah.
And now things are opening up again. Can you maybe share your experience with this opening back up again?
Yeah.
Has it been an easy transition or a difficult one?
Oh, no, it's been ridiculous. No, look, we came out of COVID and it affected everyone in really profound ways. Music industry, no different. But you can't go through something as life-changing as that and not have it surprise you in ways that you don't expect. So you go, well, everything shuts for a while. Everyone's going to be really excited to come back. And there's going to be I guess we'll play catch up. That's, I think, what I reckon a lot of the expectations were, certainly was mine. But you don't really comprehend how it's going to affect kids who have missed formative years in their school, right? You don't really know how it's going to affect people who were maybe 17, 18, 19, 20, who would have gone through all of these rites of passages, and a lot of them are music, events, gigs, festivals. You take that out of people's lives, and then you re-emerge, and those young people are the key people that really support culture, because that's where life is had, in social environments, and often music is being played. That, I think, has been one of the really profound things for a lot of musicians, because when you change people's patterns and behaviours, that sometimes doesn't come back on a clock, And so, I think most of the music industry is really suffering. And I think it's not just about coming back from COVID. It's also we're at a really transitional point for technology and the way that people, consume music, the way people make music, the barriers to entry, the number of musicians that are out there trying to put a record out. It's all collided in this really, massive way for a lot of musicians and people who work in the industry. And so where we're at right now, people don't really know what to do. And I mean, there will always be an expert out there that is drawing on some record that they have, had in their past, some achievement, and that'll become like the precedent that they use as far as the, foundation of their wisdom. This is how it works. I have done this before, and so there you go. I'm telling you how it works. Well, all those people are pretty much full of shit now. And the way that culture moves on is because people break new ground and they try new things and they experiment, and somehow there's a new torch that is sort of guiding all of these new generations and new sort of formats of how music is done. And we're at a point right now where that torch has not shone bright enough, and everyone's kind of stumbling around in the dark, and it affects touring, and it affects the industry, it affects putting records out, it affects everyone. That's why Groove in the Moo has just been cancelled. That's why a lot of other, cultural, events are kind of stumbling around a bit. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Yes, there's like 300 million people who want to go and see Taylor Swift, but Taylor Swift is an individual. She's from America. This is the thing that has affected Australia pretty profoundly, is international acts have come in and taken a huge amount of the money from the touring market, and the local artists haven't really had that same, immersive, involvement in that process to be able to build those audiences at the same time. So we've got a real transactional problem with our music industry. That's a big answer to your question, but that's a real one.
It's a great answer. How are you feeling emotionally, like on a personal level? You've been in the game for a long time and you've seen the patterns and the fluctuations, correct?
Mm.
Are you stressed?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it'd be a lie not to say that this stuff is pretty anxiety-inducing, because you're responsible for artists, you're responsible for staff, you care about their livelihoods, you wonder about the ability to punt on something. Because that's what we do. There's a lot of great artists who come out and do something amazing and you think, wow, they've got a future. And then it just never works again, because there's all sorts of factors. Mental health, the why that music resonated, why that artist connected, it's not always obvious. So everything that we do is a bit of a gamble when we decide that we love something enough that we're just going to go all in on it. And so when you carry a bit of that responsibility, you also carry the stress when you really don't have confidence in your own ability to answer the questions that they have. And I reckon that that's one of the tricky things with this current environment, is that you go to bed thinking about it, sort of toss and turn. Those thoughts kind of knock on your door at 3 a.m. and you can't get it back to sleep till 5. That's part of it. And that is also, I guess, part of being in a bit of an older person's position in the music industry now, is carrying a bit of that responsibility. So there's a stress, but there's also an acceptance, because culture moves and we're not really in control of it. And I think that's the delusional bit, is when you think you're in control of it, you start to have expectations on how everything's going to play out, and it doesn't play out like that. And that feels pretty uncomfortable. So I think that there's a certain level of acceptance that technology is going to change things, culture is going to change things. Things like COVID are going to come and kick everyone's ass, and then we're all sort of going to look around a little bit disorientated, wondering what to do next. So yeah, I think I think I'm always kind of fluctuating between stress and anxiety and acceptance and confidence in you just got to put one foot in front of the other.
Yes, sir. How old were you when you went all in on the dream?
I never had a musical background in a way. I only liked writing words, graffiti or poetry, rhymes, that sort of thing. So that's how I got my in. So I never really thought about this being a pathway for me anyway. I think it was probably sometime in the mid-2000s. I'd been involved in music for years. I had always kind of organised things. Even before I really thought about being a musician myself, I had an instinct. I didn't have the intelligence. I didn't really have that great super drive or ambition, but I had a quiet confidence, and I just had an instinct to organise stuff. So I think that led me to work in behind the scenes on the industry stuff, just organising stuff, gigs, whatever. And at the same,
as a promoter?
Well, it was more like
a
the
manager?
label. So Elephant Tracks began in 1998.
Did that
right?
start before The Herd?
Yeah.
Oh, so you know what, man? I always just assumed that The Herd and Elephant Tracks grew from that. Okay.
It's the same,
Interesting.
like a 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, because Elephant Tracks actually turned into The Herd. So a lot of the collective that were involved in volunteering and just, shit kicking, putting posters up, putting CDRs in plastic trays, taking them to the record store, selling them on consignment, we were collaborating. We were artists first and foremost. So then when it came to, a few years down the track, we were like, well, let's collaborate a bit closer. The first Herd album is just a compilation, but it's called The Herd.
Gotcha.
And that was when the band formed, but really essentially as a compilation. When you look at that record, if you go into the liner notes, there's no names, it's just logos. So we kind of had this approach to the record where everyone was anonymous. So that's the start of the band. But yeah, after a few years, there was a bit more confidence that came up, and I was working. I wasn't earning any money really, but that's not the point. That's when I started being like, I'm just going to keep on going deeper and deeper.
And organising, promoting, getting albums happening.
Yeah, I mean,
And you stuck with the original crew in The Herd. It never really changed, did it? Or you had a few collabs here and there?
Yeah, look, we pretty much did.
That's
some
right.
people came and went. There was an early period with The Herd where we were on our second or third record, and Byron Tofu, who lives in Newcastle these days, he went off to Darwin for 2 years. We weren't having band meetings going, well, we better kick Byron out. But he just wasn't there available for gigs or recording some of those records. He was doing some stuff remotely. But that's the kind of energy that we had. I think that as we got more serious, that changed, of course. Like, I remember being like, you got to take it seriously. If I'm going to sacrifice, my other career path or whatnot, I need to know that everyone is invested. And you're never going to have everyone on the same level of motivations in a group dynamic. Everyone has to play different roles, but as things got more serious, that changed a little bit. But yeah, the core crew is really tight. We're still, people say, oh, is The Herd broken up? And we're like, no, we just don't do that many gigs because everyone's really busy. We don't have anyone who's organising us. So it sounds like, why don't you guys do gigs? Those things should happen naturally. But actually, we're just sort of sitting in the background going like, there's no need to put a definitive start end. We don't need to define it at all. We haven't put any records out for a while, but we're just cruising.
Is that because no one in The Herd controls The Herd?
It's one of the sayings that
Sorry.
No. This is going to sound like a wank, but we did a podcast for Elephant Tracks, and we interviewed Paul Kelly, and he said that exact same line. He said, one of the things I love about The Herd is that saying, and unpredictable, no one in The Herd controls The Herd, And I mean, nothing really sums us up better than that. Like, we're a disparate group of individuals. None of us are really aligned in any way other than having fairly closely shared ethics And we came out of activism. We came out of electronic music. We came out of putting your body out on the street for a protest. Back when protests would be done on all sorts of different levels. Like now, it takes a lot to get people out. But back in the 90s and in the early 2000s, people were out a little bit more, I reckon. And so we came out of that, and that's where the politics comes from.
And how much did that, how detrimental was that to any type of mainstream success? I say that with like inverted comma quotes.
I don't know, you know?
You don't think it did? Because, I mean, some of your songs were so politically driven. Like that song's 70%, 77%.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that song. I actually listened to it the other day because, like, I seen something that our Prime Minister did and I just felt so fucking pissed off. And then I put that song on. It was just like, yeah, this country does need to wake up still. Yeah. And that song was written how long ago? What, close to 20 years ago?
Yeah. I mean, Battler wrote that in 2002, I think. But, yeah, it came out in 2003. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I can't even speculate on it. I reckon after a while, you know, if someone thinks they're going to make a buck out of you, then they're going to want to align with you. If it's a major label, if it's anyone else. Like, I don't really think that – I don't look to politics as an explanation why we weren't more popular, if that makes sense. But at the same time, of course – there's probably going to be a whole bunch of A&Rs out there and executives out there that are like, oh, you know, we don't really want to put a lot of money into a band that's going to tell a whole section of Australia that they're a pack of cunts, you know? I mean, that's never gone down that well in a capitalist model. So, but that's you know, what we found when we were writing those songs and sharing them was that there was a large part of Australia that was like, yeah, actually, fuck that. We really care about those issues too, and there's no other artists that are really talking about it. And, you know, I look back on that. I don't make that comment just to be spiteful or petty. It's just a fact. There was barely any artists that reached a level of kind of presence in the market, touring, festivals, radio, that were talking about political stuff, talking about wars, talking about racism, talking about xenophobia, talking about Islamophobia. So I know that we were different, and I don't think that, I think that in any kind of music environment, you want to have people who never touch politics. You know, it shouldn't be an obligation. But it's sad if you think that you got to keep it out of music. It's as if music suddenly is this untouchable part of society that is kind of shielded off, or it's got a kind of border around it where there's things you can and can't do, which is real weird. I mean, who would even want that to happen? But when people disagree with your politics, that's of course what they're going to do.
That's where I want to circle back to. You made mention of when the herd decided to get more serious, and then you described being more serious meant that you're actually, you know, giving up your day job to go in on this, which is a big commitment when you've got bills to pay, family to support, rent, etc. So there is a seriousness to that. What I'm curious about is, was there ever discussed amongst the band if there was a shared goal? Did you ever go, okay, like we are more serious, we're going all in? Was there any discussion around what's our shared goal? Was it to sell X amount of albums? Was it to make X amount of money? Was it to play every single gig in the world? What was the discussion?
It's interesting because if I went about it now, that's probably what I'd do. But I don't remember any conversations where we touched on, okay, everyone, we're going to do all these different things, but we need to agree on these core focus. And I reckon if you're trying to put a group of people together for the pursuit of a record or touring or whatever, that's a great idea. You know, that's an excellent step to give everyone a place to go back to. You know, these are our values. If we veer off too far, then we can refer back to this and go, this is what we wanted to do, and here we are over here, so let's just come back. But I reckon that one of the best things about the herd process, particularly, a lot of artists have their own, and a lot of other artists on the label have their own. but we will talk heaps. And when we were writing records, we would talk about politics, and we would test each other, and we would challenge each other on our perspectives, and through that, you'd learn. You know, I remember when we did the record Future Shade, we did a song called Red Queen Theory. And I didn't even know what the Red Queen Theory was. But we were talking all about the idea of the Red Queen theory, which really is one of the underpinning kind of philosophies of capitalism. You just got to keep on going faster and faster and faster. And if, you know, if you slow down, you get you know, surpassed and forgotten. And some of these ideas and the way that they applied to geopolitics, you know, international relations, capitalism, all these sorts of things, they're really interesting subject matter to talk about. Like if you're with a bunch of friends, you're talking about whatever you're talking about. Maybe you're talking about things that are really important. You go a bit deeper. You have a deeper connection with your friends. Those things are always the way to define real, true, deep friendships, right? Is your ability to kind of have vulnerabilities and not be judged. But in a band setting and even in a friendship setting, it's sometimes interesting to kind of engage with this shit. Not on a, oh, did you read the news there? That thing happened. But actually go, what does that mean? You know, what does the Red Queen theory mean? And I think that's one of the things that, particularly me and Kenny, who's the founder of Elephant Tracks, his artist name's Tracksuit, and he's in the herd as well. These are the things you miss. Not necessarily playing in front of 10,000 people. You miss sometimes that synergy between band members where you have the excuse. It's almost like a privilege to talk about these things because you've got to do this joint thing together. And that's like shared goals in a way because you're testing each other and you're chatting. The dialogue's there. It's healthy. You're not passing the time. It's not just banter. It's not just, you know, a friend of mine or stepsister of mine, she refers to conversations on tiered levels. It's not just tier one, you know, how you going? What's going on? The sun's shining. Tough weekend, whatever. Tier two, slightly a little bit more in depth. Tier three, you're really kind of connecting. Tier four, there's almost, you know, you trust each other implicitly to talk about things that are inherently really vulnerable for you. And I think sometimes those things, that's not necessarily the band, right? But that conversation and that shared focus of a creative goal means that sometimes you get to kind of have more human experiences along the way.
Yes, brother. I love that. Tiers. I struggle with tier 1 and 2. Like I really, even today, I just had to make small talk with some new friends. And I was just like, oh yeah, it's raining today. Yeah, fuck, it's raining.
I mean, that's what it is. Tier 1 is small talk. That's, you know.
I know, and you know what? I guess you got to build your way up to things, don't you? Like, but I don't want to sound like pretentious or even precocious by saying that. But I'm just like, something I've got to work on personally, maybe.
I mean, we do. We ring fence ourselves around these tiers, you know, and the small talk, and they keep us protected. There's a reason why you just don't go any further with. You don't want to go further with someone's parent that you're meeting at pickup. Like, there are reasons why those things are right for their right place, you know. But if that's all of your relationships, and you wonder why you feel hollow sometimes, it's a no-brainer. You part of our human experience is connecting with other humans, and of course, that's not going to be easy for everyone. And there's reasons why, for some people, that's really difficult, and that's understandable too. But at its core, that really kind of helps you make sense of the world,
bro. And you said you were embarking on starting a podcast as well, or continue to do the Elephant Tracks one, correct?
Yeah. Well, this is not like yours.
Okay.
You know, we don't have that long devotion and commitment, which I, really, it's a real pleasure to come in so deep into your podcast and to share a moment, because there's so many. I'm only one little drop, but for the thing that we're doing, it's telling the story of Elephant Tracks over 25 years. So it's a lot of planning and a lot of interviewing before we even think about sharing.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Because that's one thing that's emerged for me over the years of doing it now is the amount of people who have reached out to me because they have become so isolated in their own mind.
Yeah.
And the podcast, and to be able to be like somewhat of a voyeur into someone else's conversation and listening to people talk about their feelings, their experiences and their journey has been really liberating for them. And they're like, I'm going to start trying to talk to my friends about my feelings. And it's like, yeah, like I'm blown away by it actually. And it makes me really sad because I don't think anyone should be living like in any sort of mental or social isolation. And the irony is that we live in a more connected world than we ever have, and we have more isolated people than we ever have. And it's killing me, man. And I worry about my kids. You know, I really do. So.
Yeah, it's one of the great mysteries of the world, isn't it? You know, it's easier to connect than ever before, but we've got this epidemic of loneliness and isolation.
That's what it is, bro.
Yeah, I mean, there's more tricks to putting up walls, and I think it definitely hits people differently when they get to a certain age, and one of their mates no longer talks, or someone takes more extreme measures, and everyone sort of sits around and thinks, how did that happen? Yet there's a real benefit in being able to work out ways to bring people in.
And like you said, there's a lot of distractions, and I'm wondering if that's part of the reason why people aren't going to more gigs. Turning up, showing up, and I was like, I can watch a video of a gig, or I can go to a live stream, or I don't know.
Yeah, real human experiences are underrated, and I think that it's like eating junk food or whatever. The short-term joy or hit or high, that short-term appeal is so compelling, and it's so like when you go to a shop and you're a bit hungry, maybe not even that hungry, but that immediacy. And then the aftermath is like, well, it may not be the worst in the world. Maybe you feel a bit shit. Maybe you don't, whatever. But you've done something for the short term when actually our deeper happiness and the longer positivity around our relationships always comes from a little bit more of a, where we discipline ourselves, where we actually put ourselves out there. Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why we've taught ourselves to remove our human connection, and I reckon that there's that's unfortunate.
It is, bro. It really is. It's funny because I went to a gig in the Horton Pavilion on Wednesday night. I went down and watched Queens of the Stone Age, and it was the middle of the week, so I had to work the next day, and my friend got me a ticket, and I was just like, I was having these like, I don't want to go. Like, it's such a mission. But I did want to go because I've listened to him for a while. And I went to that gig and, oh, man, like just the vibration and the feeling coming out of those speakers, and just to see they're still so passionate about their music and just completely in their element. I mean, I just left so uplifted, and I'm still buzzing days later. And you can't get that from a screen, bro.
Yeah. Look, I mean, it's funny, because I scroll, I sit on that phone, and I reckon it's there's something about stoicism here where you enforce little rules around your life that give you better balance, and you start to realize that the thing that puts you on a bit more of an even keel is sometimes actually not answering to your own immediate needs and your own, or not needs, but the wants, and that's hard because we've especially depending on where you've come from, everyone comes to that decision-making process from a different place. For some person, putting a bunch of limitations around their own choices is just part of life. It's something that you do every now and again when you fall off the wagon and you are fully capable of, not being impulsive and making smart decisions. There's a whole lot of other people that, for all sorts of reasons, can't come to that decision from the same neutral place, right? But yeah, for me personally, and that's what I guess I want to just make clear is this is for me. You know, I don't want to speak for other people.
Yep.
But every time that I'm able to put some restrictions on myself and think about what I've, you know, not just indulged in,
Gotcha.
I come off the back of it always feeling a bit stronger, you know, a bit better in myself, bit kind of more confident.
Yes.
Ability to go, yeah, you know what, if I face some sort of shit, I know that I can deal with it. And, you know, for the most part, I can deal with most things, and most people can, like hungover, tired, sleep deprived, whatever. But it's always better to be able to be managing those things and know that you've got the ability to kind of to deal with shit when it comes up. I mean, it's a good, strong place to be.
Yes, sir. It is. I get it. Hey, where'd you grow up?
I was born out in Campbelltown at Camden Hospital, and I spent a few years there. Then I moved elsewhere. Then I moved to the Blue Mountains, and the Blue Mountains is where I consider my home.
So that were your formative years, teenage years?
So I was in the mountains when I was about 8 or 9 through to about 19.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, you know, I want to get some of the, a bit of a basic question out of the way. Did you find music or did music find you?
Well, I got into music from writing.
So, okay, right. Poetry?
Poetry,
creative writing?
Rhymes, poetry. Not really that much writing, in a kind of creative writing way, yeah.
Why did you feel like you wanted to write poetry as a young person?
I don't know. It's the same reason I don't fully know what was the bond with hip-hop and hip-hop culture. I don't quite work out. I loved it, and I got into it as soon as I moved from my John Farnham, what's his name? I can't remember the other artist. I had 2 main artists that they were the 2 first records I bought.
Same, dude. John, You're the Voice was my first album ever I bought with my own money.
Yeah, Whispering Jack.
Whispering Jack, sorry.
Yeah, first record, yeah.
What was your other one? I've got to know.
Get out of my dreams.
Oh, yeah. Huey Lewis and the News, dude.
No, it's this is going to be bad because whoever's listening will be like, we know this. Yeah. Anyway, this is the first 2 records.
Billy Ocean.
Billy Ocean. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
You got there. You saved a bit of embarrassment.
I sung
half.
Actually, in my head, I sung half the song before it clicked.
I don't know what appealed, but I got into hip hop culture straight after that. That was it for me in a lot of ways. But I was writing poetry at that time. All it was, I did not want to be giving anyone any illusion of what this was. It was 10-year-old, 11-year-old boy writing nursery rhymes and rewriting all the lyrics. There was nothing classy about it. There was nothing
at 10.
There was nothing. There was no Yeats. There was no Keats. There was just beats. That was it. It was the sort of thing I would read out to my aunt who was a missionary. And she would cut me off halfway through. She's going to hate it because she might listen to this, but it is one story that I kind of hold on to is that it was foul what we were doing. She knew what she was like. This is disgusting, and she was right. but no, it was that's the sort of shit that I did, and I really loved hip hop culture at the same time. So that was what exposed me to a lot of political hip hop too. Because back in the late 90s and late 80s, early 90s, there was a lot of really Afrocentric hip-hop that was saying some stuff that was way over my head, but it opened my eyes.
You liked how it felt when you listened to it?
It was just...
You weren't considering what it was actually saying?
No, I was. I was grappling with it because they were talking about, black... They were talking about white devils. They were talking about civil rights. They were talking about racism on levels that I had no comprehension of as a young white kid. And one of the first things that did for me was start making me wonder what the Australian version of this was. And so I think that's the first time I even, really started to look around at what happened in Australia and colonisation and, First Nations experience. Obviously, I was just a kid, but it's what opened my eyes to it because school didn't.
No, God, no. I mean, I dare say that because I think we're in the same age range. I think about the education that came in my classroom, and upon reflection, it was sheer propaganda.
Yeah. All the textbooks. Yep, all of it. Captain Cook, all of it. Like, and that's the thing is, people get real divided in these culture wars because they're really contesting history. They're saying, no, you're trying to encourage a different version of history. Well, actually, a lot of Aboriginal people are just saying, no, we just want history to be told. You know, we don't want to be the version that all Australian kids were brainwashed to believe is the facts and the truth. We just want the real version because a strong, proud country is not afraid of lying about its past. It's able to accept its flaws and work on them and become a better country as a result. I mean, most people across the divide would probably agree with that fundamentally, but there's still such a denial of what's happened here. And I reckon hip-hop culture was really amazing in the way that it taught
Why do you think that denial still exists in our society?
I think that it upholds power structures now, that there's still the same people that essentially pull in the strings. So, of course, people in power are going to want to hold on to that power. And white people are ultimately the ones at the top of the pile. Now, not every white person is going to be sitting from a great height and shitting on people, but of course not. But we also have a real vested interest in keeping status quo as it is. And yeah, I mean,
it's bizarre.
It means that you have people like Andrew Bolt, you know, tweaking the fear and the worries about a different version of our society replacing the current one, rather than just going, no, we could just be fucking honest and genuine with each other and grapple with it, deal with it. What does that actually mean? And work it out from there. I mean, I know I'm simplifying. What am I? I'm a bloody rapper talking about this shit. But
you're entitled to your opinion, though.
I'm always a big advocate for being real about what's actually happened, dealing with it genuinely, and then moving on. Like the connection of people to one another, the treatment of the land, the sustainability of it, the respect of the country. Like all of these things, you have to make a choice to say, we do not endorse that. Like we have to make a conscious choice that any acknowledgement of that is a threat. That is absolutely what is, you know, what is the motivation for trying to paint First Nations traditions, connection to the land, rights within that country in anything other than something that we all should collectively be proud about.
Yeah, bro, for sure. Were your parents supportive of your poetry writing and even as a young child? And even when you were writing maybe stuff that was like as a young child being silly but maybe a little bit gross?
Yeah. I was always lucky. My mum
nurtured it.
My old man left around that same time, like around 10.
Okay.
But my mum was always supportive of whatever I did. You know, if that was being a musician, she was supportive. Right. If that was having dreams of playing sports as some kind of a job or a pastime, even though there was absolutely no hope. I was passionate in sports, but there's a massive difference between having any kind of opportunity to be professional. She fully endorsed it.
Did she?
Go for it. Yep, you do that. You know,
right.
Yeah, she never got in the way of anything.
Have you got fond memories of your childhood with your parents?
Yeah, mostly. Yeah, look, you know, I think having a more complicated relationship with my old man has always just been one of those things that a lot of people have, and you know, I go through different phases with him. And I think a lot of it, you have to have some level of acceptance with it rather than trying to, you know, hope that your parents will become the version of themselves that you hope that they'll be. So, yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I think that sometimes that means it's two-sided when you as the kid, even if you're an adult, want it to be your version.
Yeah, it was a challenging day for me as an adult, accepting that my parents are flawed humans like everyone else, as I am. and that acceptance of it and my role in it. And yeah, like coming in with an expectation and getting the same result over and over, but you keep putting your hand back in the fire, hoping you'll get a different result.
Yeah.
It took me like most of my life to deal with that. But then my father passed away, you know, and that just, I don't get that time back now. And it's made me reflect on my part in these things. So that's really interesting you said that.
Yeah, the dynamics between families should be simpler, shouldn't they?
So gnarly. It's so gnarly.
I mean, there are things that are simple transactional issues that become like a web when it comes to family. You know, nothing simple.
You're a father yourself now. How have you found that the experiences you had as a child are now influencing or impacting upon your ability to be a parent?
Yeah.
Too deep?
Nah, they get you by surprise, I reckon. You know, and it's all good and well to project externally the kind of parent that you want to be and have that sort of feel like the parent that you are, as opposed to the one that you are in present with your kid.
Yeah.
And the time that you spend with them. And yeah, I think one of probably the most sort of on the edge elements of that question, or the answer to that question, is the one where you are reconciling the type of role your dad provided to you, and hoping that at some point now, in the future, in the past, whatever, obviously in the past it's gone, you won't replicate that. Like you won't become that father to your child, you know. And so I think there's a little bit of fear that's associated with that, because obviously you're an adult, you can make decisions, you take responsibility, you do not allow for that to happen. But also life's complicated. You go through stress. You might abuse drugs or alcohol. You might have all sorts of extenuating circumstances, difficulties at work, all sorts of things that make you not the parent that you want to be.
Yeah, man.
And so I don't know. I think that's just a work in progress. And my daughter's always teaching me stuff, and I'm always having to remember that just by doing most things right doesn't mean that you can settle and just be comfortable that that's enough. Everything's always just work in progress. Oh, I've dropped the ball here. I've got to pick it back up. I've got to I've got to reacquaint myself with my full-on responsibility, because that's a priority. Like all the other things. I remember Joel Winnetong told me this from the last connection many years ago. I think he's got 7 kids. Maybe 8 kids.
So hectic.
So hectic. Doctor, rapper, producer, does it all.
Wow.
Anyway, he was saying like there are some balls you can drop and some balls will bounce back.
Yeah, right.
And family is a ball you can't drop.
Yes, that's a good one.
Jobs are balls that will bounce back. To some, you know, these things affect everyone differently, but the priorities and the ability for us to get back to a kind of a clarity there, get back to the center of what you should be doing. And I think that I try my best. And I also think for a lot of parents out there, like you're gonna make mistakes. And I think that if you've got love and you've got protection, then all those other little mistakes are gonna kind of fall by the wayside. Just don't fuck up those basic ones. And if you do fuck them up, just go fix them. Go back to them.
100%. And like I think parenting guilt is a real thing, and you can't let that affect you moving forward. That's the big thing I've learned too. It's like, I'll make a mistake, but I actually need to own the mistake, show the children that I own the mistake, and then move on from it. I find it's when you avoid it and go, it just seems like it snowballs.
That's some bandit shit right there, man.
What do you mean?
I'm from Bluey.
Oh, is that what he says? I've never watched Bluey.
Oh, you're missing out. Nah, he's a good role model for dads. Obviously, he's referred to a lot, but it is one of those things you can actually admit mistakes to your kids. You know,
does Bandit advocate for that?
Yeah.
No,
all about
shit.
it. Yeah,
that's so rad.
I mean, it's one of those things where, you know, you know when you've messed up. You know, like there's a difference between. And it's not even a catastrophic mess up. It's just sometimes maybe you've talked too firmly to your kid. And, you know, sometimes you think, well, that's cool. This is just discipline. Or there's other times which is like, well, yes, but there's going to be consequences for that. Your kid is learning all the time, and they're learning what they can and can't do around you. And you can never be perfect with that. That's fine. But it's also something that means that it's not just for them to do all the learning. It's not just for them to grow up. It's also you. You got to grow up and learn too, and it's a good place to be.
Yeah, dude, it's so true. And I mean, and you sort of mentioned, and it's been such a common theme on the podcast, people relaying the fact that maybe their father left the family. I mean, it happened to me, you know. And I don't know the details of your situation, and you obviously don't need to share that. But the point I want to make is that it is such a gnarly responsibility. You know, because I always wonder, like, why is it so common for the dad to bail? And I think it's because a lot of dudes are really struggling to man up to how big this responsibility is. And you said it perfectly, like, your kids are always learning. And that in itself, just being in their presence, can be sometimes really mentally exhausting and a burden and feel like a burden. But, yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of men have got a lot of other things that are going on inside their heads, and once again comes back to the ability to keep a healthy, like, you know, mental space is to be able to not just become a mess when things get hard.
Yeah.
And that's not simple, and I wouldn't want to talk as if I know how that plays out for everyone, but that's you know, it does get hard. And for women, you know, quite often they don't have a choice. You know, often the kids end up with the mum, and the mum's the one who really shoulders it. Certainly did in my family, and certainly did in a lot of families that I know. And not every family, but as a lot, like the majority, women are the ones who are left holding the weight and the responsibility. Men do have a little bit more of an ability to just go, fuck it, I can't, this is too much, you know. But I reckon those men suffer because they're missing out on what is really, you know, meaningful in life. So it is a decision that can be made, but it's not necessarily in their genuine interest, you know.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, women give up their bodies. Yeah, but their bodies are never really the same after childbirth. It takes such a toll on their bodies, you know. I talk about that a lot, actually, like, because us men will never really understand that as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Hey, who would you describe over the years in your music journey as like some of your big hip hop influences? I'm so curious.
Big hip hop influences. Funnily enough, I mean,
do you have any standouts?
There's been a few things that have happened along the way. Some are innocent. Some have been like long-term relationships that have enriched me, you know.
Yeah.
And there's one relatively innocent one that happened early on. It would have been late 90s, and this older hip-hop artist, his name's Kuro. He was an influential hip-hop artist in the 90s, and as I was just starting to find my feet, he certainly had a lot more cultural authority and respect in the hip-hop community. And I remember one time I just did a song on stage, and he pulled me aside and said, look, you've got what it takes. You can do this. You should keep on doing this.
Yeah.
And I reckon that one single comment, and that's what I mean by innocent. It wasn't like this guy was mentoring me for years and putting all this time. We were working together for sure on little things here and there, but the innocence of that question, of that statement,
yeah, right,
was like more powerful than anything else, because that didn't happen. I didn't have any mentors. So most of the relationships that I had were peers, but that gave me fuel. That was I ate on that. Like that, I lived on that one comment for a long time. It gave me confidence, and I've had other relationships. I would say someone like Hal, who used to be in a group called Coolism, and now is involved in lots of Triple J stuff and runs his own label. He's interesting because we have really different versions of our experience as hip-hop artists.
Yeah.
But he's ended up a little bit closer to mine in that he, you know, runs a label and is really an influential figure in the hip-hop community. He's paid his dues. It's interesting the way that working relationship and that mutual respect grows and evolves over the years. Definitely think some of the Elephant Tracks people were really influential for me in the early days, insofar as showing me what drive and ambition meant to them, and and making it make sense for myself, because I had this other inner drive too myself. So when it comes to broader hip hop artists, yeah, I'd say Solo from Horror Show has always been, you know, a person who I can really genuinely connect. You know, for people who are fans of Horror Show, there's a real dedication from their fan base to their music. And I think it's partly because he's a real deep character, and he has a lot of, you know, he would describe himself as an overthinker. And I've always told him, and I'm Horror Show's manager, or have been Horror Show's manager, so I have a responsibility of mentoring them. And that's one of my focus points at my work, is to make the right decisions for them, with them, you know. And he's a listener. And his overthinking, I've told him, is also his superpower, which also goes back to his lyric in one of his songs, which is, you know, a thing's greatest strength is also its greatest weakness. And nothing is truer than that. Every single thing that we do well has some sort of Achilles heel that is related to that brings us down. And there's this you know, balance that is achieved when you can draw on the strength of that, but also understand that you are vulnerable to that.
So how do you balance that personally? Like how do you balance your artistic career with your commitment to things like, well, it seems you have a commitment to social change. I mean, I watched you perform at a 2-day environmentalism protest, the Rising Tide, 2-day blockade. So how do you balance that? What are your strategies? So that the like you said, you use the term Achilles heel of your strengths. Have you thought about it much, or
sometimes I think
just sink or swim?
I think sometimes I think about it. I think other times you just got to be your own self, you know.
Okay.
And things that touch on political issues are important to me. Okay. I mean, I might be wrong, or I might be right, or I might be somewhere in between. Either way, they're important to me. Like the same way that getting a surfboard and going out into the water is important to somebody else. These things I can't remove from my thinking process, and my thinking process is my creative process.
And you don't care if that's polarizing parts of your audience?
I think that there's a dialogue that is ideal, where you can talk about things that people are going to disagree with, but you don't have to always come from a place of hostility and conflict. I think that there is an ability to have a conversation with people even if they disagree.
Oh, my God. So many people don't understand that.
I reckon as I've grown older, I've become more aware of how wrong I've been in the past. Not wrong in a big way, like, oh, gee, I was racist when I was younger. No, I was never that. I always really, those things made sense to me. But just getting issues wrong, communicating them wrong, coming on too strong, being too arrogant in that I'm right or that this is important and you got to listen to me. I think that I've softened on those things. I think there are things that I'm like, nah, at some point you just got to call it as you see it. And if that's wrong, it's wrong. But I don't think, I could lose too much of my audience by acknowledging this fundamentally true part of my personality. I think that's what we do as musicians.
Because that's a strength as well.
Yep. Yeah. Look, musicians, for the most part, once you become professional and you know where the money is, then you iron out all the edges. I mean, I know you look at most musicians in Australia and you look at their social media, and I could invite you to do that, anyone listening, to go and, I mean, you're not going to do this. I know you're not going to do this, but like if you look at 100 different artists and you look at their entire feed, you will see one really common thing that comes up, and that is that there is very little polarizing opinions on things. Sometimes with certain artists, they might come out with some things from time to time, but you become accustomed to trying to please that middle, because the middle is the customers. And I mean, I don't mean to, like, I'm not being disparaging. I think it's a survival mechanism, because we don't have security in our work. We don't have a guarantee. There is no food that is on our plate tomorrow night. Like, we don't have superannuation. We don't have an employer. We don't have salaries. They do not exist to all the artists. So I'm not begrudging the majority of artists for finding that palatable middle ground on a lot of things and being fearful of ruffling feathers. Like, that is understandable, but that's not me. And I've definitely made decisions over the years, or I'm not going to talk about that, or I won't make a post because I know that my comment section will just be flooded with racists, for example. Oh, Adam Goods, you even mention his name, and it brings out all these rednecks to the yard. Like, it is just, you know things after a while. This is going to be stress for me. And I reckon that's what everyone who's in a position of privilege, where you have an audience or you have a platform or something, has to reconcile with that. What are you going to do? What are you going to do with it? Well, there's no rule that says you got to do anything with it other than make money, live a happy life or whatever. Like, at some point, it's not for me to sit there and, throw stones at those people because everyone's different. But there's also that thing, we're only on this bloody rock for 80 years. As a musician, if you're lucky, you might have 5 years in the sun. If you're lucky. And that's if you're lucky. Then the rest of it, you just got to be passionate about it and know why you do it, and why you love it. And it's not just about making money. It's not just about pleasing as many people as you can, because ultimately they've got to have a positive association with you when you've got a tour on, right? So I think that there's every artist going to have a question and answer around what they do with their voice and who they are and how they're true to it. I think it's a sad thing if these things are really important to you and you're so-called intellectual, but you refrain from it. Like, you iron those things out. I feel like that's fuck, man. Art is part of social change. Art is part of how we have a public conversation about everything. Politicians and media are the ones who generally drive the meaning that happens in our society. This is what we're going to legislate on. This is the thing that's going to keep the country going. And here's the way that we're going to perceive all these things. Well, who else gets to have a say apart from people chiming in on social media? Art is a central part of the way that the whole fucking society moves, the cogs in the wheels, how we all the beauty of music that I love is that you don't have to kind of know all the facts and be like, oh, I've got a political song. Sometimes it's feeling. There's no journalist, there's no politician for the most part, apart from being inspiring or whatever. There's no other form that can communicate a message in the same way that music does, because it's feeling, it's like that saying which I'm going to butcher now, which is you can people can forget all of the messages and what you've said, but if you can leave them with a feeling, they'll remember you, and feeling sometimes it's not just words, it's music, it's the way that the chords relate to the melody, the voice, all these things can help change not even change people's opinion, but and that's one big thing for me is making music or being involved in social change isn't about changing people's minds necessarily. Sometimes it's just about giving them a buffer or a bit of energy, or pushing it along a little bit, or even just reminding them that they're not alone. And that's one of the great things about music is being able to remind people that they're not alone.
Oh, dude, it's really good. I love that. Do you ever consider your legacy?
Nah, not really.
No.
Nah.
Because I asked that because it kind of ties into what everything you were just saying then. It's for those people that do take the middle ground out of safety, what do you really want to be remembered for? Do you want to be remembered for that? Or do you want to be remembered for someone that went, hey, this is what I believe and this is what I feel and I'm going to say it, stand up. But it's a scary place to be for so many reasons.
Fully, yeah. And you know what? If I'm honest, for both good and bad sides of any kind of position, right?
Yeah.
Because people who are taking right-wing positions on things become targets as well.
Absolutely.
And that's just like taking a left-wing position on something, I mean, obviously they're not the same, but they still upset people.
Yeah.
The same polarizing thing. I think I don't think about how I'm going to be remembered. It's not something that
Really?
occurs to me. No, not at all. Because
How would you want to be like?
how I want to be remembered.
Well, yeah, let me reframe it. How would you want to be as of like today? You know, considering your accolades and your accomplishments.
Yeah, look,
What would be the one that you'd most prefer?
I think that it would be that I served the people around me, right? That it wasn't just like, I think that part of my own motivation is self-driven, like it's self-invested. It's my own career. But really, the thing that makes what we are involved in meaningful is that the platforms that we can help provide to a lot of young artists and other artists around us. So that's serving the community and making it better, or hopefully making it better than when you came into it. So that's, I mean, it sounds like
No, that's right.
It is a little bit, I think that those things are deeper than just I want to make records that sell.
Yeah, for sure. How many artists do you sign under Elephant Tracks at the moment?
I never know.
Is that a tough question?
Yeah, I never know, because some artists are inactive. Some artists have left. Some artists are still putting records out. I don't know. It's always around 10 or 15.
Yeah, okay. Oh, that's cool. That's cool. And you like the mentorship aspect of it?
Oh, yeah, I love it.
Do you?
I love it because I never got that. And I think that it's one of those, I just remember the power of that one artist giving me a bit of love.
Yeah, man.
And I was like, fuck, if that was all I needed, I didn't really need all the technical advice. I just needed to be told that I can do it and it's okay. I mean, that comes from a place of insecurity, needing someone else to tell you that what you're doing is okay, but we're fucking humans. We're insecure,
Yeah, dude.
Everyone's insecure.
Dude, you've played so many rad festivals over the years, big day outs, dude. And can you just tell me like a standout festival or concert, man, where you just had a massive crowd? Because I mean, like a big day out, for example, you're going to acquire a huge crowd just because it's already there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What's a standout? You've got to have a standout moment.
It's funny, those festivals, they all look like everything's great all the time.
Do they?
Yeah. And you're right.
They do. I've had some great times.
Yeah. No, same. I mean, music festivals, they exist as their own version of some, on steroids gig. And I love it. The culture of it's great. But you do have pressure as an artist. Like the whole time before it, will they come? Will they come? Will they come? Artists, like the fans all kind of clear off from the stage, go to the next gig. You sit there and the anxiety is just roaring around your stomach. The butterflies are going nuts because you're just like, there's so many people here. Am I just about to face the greatest, most humiliating failure of my life? I reckon a lot of musicians are thinking that as before the stage. And quite often, by the time you're one song in, there's 5,000 people. You're like, wow, I'm just on the high that is so out of whack with any rational version of my life right now, because you're on an adrenaline rush. That's like, I am the greatest, You have that feeling for fucking 1 hour. And then you have to reconcile that with like, oh, actually, I am not the greatest the next morning,
I was going to say, so do you get a full come down?
Oh, fully. Every gig.
Yeah, okay. Because what goes up must come down.
Exactly, yeah.
And not a lot of people most people do not experience what you felt.
Yeah, it's because it's not real. And
you accept that?
Yeah, it's totally not real. So
say it's real.
It's okay. So you're really at the gig.
Yeah.
The crowd are really yelling.
Yeah, right.
What goes on in your mind is not real, and it's because we're not supposed to have that as a way of living. Like, we're not supposed to be filled with such a massive level of adoration that you create an egotistical, you're up on a great height. The ego is telling you that this is a version of life that is sustainable. It's nothing sustainable about it at all. Like half an hour after the gig, there's no one there.
But
you're by yourself.
How many artists get caught up in that? They get a taste of it. It must be like heroin or something. It must be so addictive.
Everyone does. And how did and it's
why didn't it catch up with you then?
It's unreasonable. Of course it did. it's unreasonable to think that you can be put through that experience as a human being and not be thrown around by it. And that's the best way to describe it. You get thrown around by it, which is also why musicians and artists, especially touring artists, have such massive substance abuse problems. And it's not every artist, of course, but that's one of the biggest challenges. You take all the routine out of your life, you put them into lots of transient environments, you throw the emotional roller coaster, you throw them on the emotional roller coaster. And then they have to reconcile things like going back home to maybe their partner or their family on a Monday, and someone's like, you haven't done this job. And you have to kind of reconcile what's real and what's not. And what's real is that relationship that you have at home. What's not is whatever egotistical, firework that you allowed yourself to be, cast off into the stratosphere with. Because that's amazing if you can just let it be what it is. Because you're right. And that's a funny thing about it. It is real. But it's
not sustainable.
It's not sustainable. That's the fundamental point of it. It's not sustainable.
It's just funny, like you mentioned, like the fear you have, like in the lead up.
Yeah.
I mean, do you still get that?
Sometimes,
even on a micro level.
Yeah. Because you don't want to be humiliated.
Yeah. So it's kind of like hard work, a bit of anxiety, fear, euphoria.
Yeah.
Depression.
Yeah. Well, it can.
Not depression, but come down.
Yeah, the come down, and sometimes that is depression. But yeah, like trying to be like, oh, I am this person. Oh, wait, no, I'm not. Wait, I'm this person. No, I'm not. That can throw you around for sure. One of the things I loved most on the road was the playing poker at about 1 a.m. each night with the herd. Doing that, like the euphoria is gone. Like the gig itself, there's nothing higher than that. But just the calm, the relief of just being with your friends. And those were always times that I look forward to most. Like you'd done the job.
How old were you roughly when you played your first gig to a large audience, maybe over a few thousand?
Probably like 25.
Okay.
I was a late bloomer.
Oh, you call that late? I guess a little bit late.
Yeah. Yeah, look, you asked me before what was the actual gig and I never even answered you.
It's all right.
I'd say one of the gigs. Sorry, I'll just do it while we're chatting. For a while there, you'd put out songs that get played by radio and you'd feel that energy build and that exchange as a song would go from people not knowing it to being able to remember the lyrics. And the first few gigs where you get to perform it live are like nothing else. And I remember I was only 19, the cover on Like a Version. And we did the Big Day Out the year after. And I remember I think we did the Boiler Room, but we played on these stages and some of these songs, I mean, it was the same for I Was Only 19 as to songs like The King Is Dead. Those moments that the crowd are so loud and they're singing, and then sometimes like the song would finish and the crowd would just be clapping and screaming for minutes. And those minutes felt like hours, and you're sort of looking around at the band and you're all smiling. You don't know what to do with like this feeling of it's intoxicating,
Dude.
And so, yeah, like we did the Big Day Out run where we played in Gold Coast, it was like that. In Adelaide, it was like that. In Sydney, it was like that. Those stages were amazing. I mean, there's 10,000 on those stages, and you're just looking out in raptures.
But as a 25-year-old, did you have your periods of going wayward?
Oh, yeah.
Just, maybe like burning yourself out with too much partying in between?
Oh, yeah. So I was working on Elephant Tracks.
Yep.
I was running the label. I was managing some artists. They're kind of quasi-managing. I wasn't experienced enough to do it, but I was sort of doing it. What would happen is that we were on a cycle of putting a Herd record out, then an Urthboy record out, then a Herd record out, then an Urthboy record out. And so it was almost like constantly touring. And the only reason I wouldn't be touring an Urthboy record is because the Herd jumped in and their touring took priority over my own touring. Gotcha. Bigger group. That was the main project. And so what that life looked like was working Monday to Friday or Monday to Thursday, touring Thursday to Sunday, And if you're doing a 2-month tour, that's 2 months of 7 days a week. And then you kind of come back and crash, and then you sort of get back in it and do it again. Of course, it's just constant burnout. And what happens, I guess, when you're depleted of energy, you make bad decisions, you're eating bad, you're staying up late, you're smoking weed, drinking booze, you know, you're doing things that feel like they are just to keep you going. You know, they're just calm things. They're just like, I'm so tired. Oh, wow, that beer tastes so good.
Yeah, yeah,
you know,
gotcha.
I'm kind of back, you know?
Yeah.
And it just builds and builds and builds. Yeah, I just continuously, you know, was like on the cusp of burning out. But at the same time, the workload was not really an issue.
Okay.
Because the workload was inspiring. I loved it. It was what I was passionate about. Yeah, I was really into it. You can do a lot of extra work if you love what you're doing.
Yes, brother. Yes. Okay. Oh, dude, I love that. It's so true. Hey, I want to talk about your album, The Signal, your solo album. You know, like, would you say that it's kind of exploring the impact of technology on society? Is that the basic premise of it?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Not really. I mean,
Okay.
maybe on some songs.
Yeah.
Those things are kind of weaved in and out of my mind, but
Yeah. Like, I don't know. It just feels like a lot of your music is like addressing contemporary issues. Yeah. I think that must be challenging to stay relevant. Like, is that, yeah, or you're not thinking that deeply about it?
oh yeah, for sure. As I get older,
You are?
you're wondering how to be true to yourself because, yeah, it's a young person's game. And it is. And I don't say that because I'm ageist, because I am older. I say it because that's where the current is. That's where the middle of the current is. And that's what's going quick.
Okay.
But there's all space for older artists as well, because there's older people. You know, older people are not as enamored by the stories that 18-year-olds telling, right? And why would they?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously music is music, and if it's a great song, it's a great song, and 18-year-olds can make great music for 80-year-olds, and there's no borders there, right? But at the same time, like, a lot of the time, if you're 50 years old, you want to hear some 50-year-old telling you what life is like, you know, because that's what you resonate with. Like, it's
Gotcha.
not. I don't even want to say this stuff as if there's rules, whatever. But you know, there should be space for everyone. And for me, there is a relevance for sure, but it's like an accountability to my own creativity. It's not relevant to some 24-year-old who's actually a gig goer. Like,
You're realistic about that. You're not hanging on to the past, because I've had one of my last guests recently was talking about that. Yeah. Just to get, you personally, you could easily get stuck in the past. You know that, don't you?
Yeah, and I reckon we all do.
And hang on a bit too long to the past.
Yeah. I mean, it's one person's perception of that is going to be different to your perception of it, right? And there are going to be moments where you're nostalgic about. I mean, if you're a bit older, you're probably nostalgic for when you had more hair. Why didn't I do this when I was in my 20s? Like, I definitely look at my entire 20s and all of the records we put out. I don't ever think I cut my hair for any photos or anything. You know, I was always a bit shaggy, and I look back and I'm like, what the fuck was I thinking? Like, I'm an artist, there's a time and a place. And I look at a lot of younger artists being a lot more self-conscious now, and I think, you know, that's not, it's not something that I regret, but I also look at these old photos like, I'm not in a grunge band, you know, like, there's something good about dressing up and being all, you know, leaning in, you know. Yeah. So I don't think it's so much about trying to be relevant to people, to the version of yourself that you're not. I think it truly is about being accountable to your creativity and not just resting on your laurels, not just doing the same thing over and over again. It's like, how do you challenge yourself? How do you get to a new place? How do you embrace some discomfort that might break open a new thing? And it's harder to do that as you get older, and you've got less time that you can dedicate to it. So that, of course, that's going to be a massive compromise. So I think it's more about just finding new ways to try and break some sort of new ground for your own self personally. Yes.
And I also believe that Australian hip-hop acts always seem to be quite gritty, maybe even, you know, a little bit grungy. It's not like a lot of Australian hip-hop artists grew up in the streets of LA or New York, so they don't have that fresh vibe, like, as fresh, in my opinion. So I think that grittiness kind of really suited the herd, you know. Where do you reckon the herd fits into the history of Australian music?
Just
Do you think?
yeah.
Because okay, again, amongst me and some of my friends, like we feel like you were quite significant, especially for our era, our genre, our age range. Like, like early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. Really that music is part of our growing up journey and formative years. Do you ever think about that?
Yeah, it's hard to understand where the herd fits into the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Because we had a real period between 2001 to 2 and 2012 where we were really active. And I reckon if you look at the catalogue of music that we wrote, you'd find a lot of observations about what life was really like then. It wasn't just a bunch of love songs. We never did one single love song. So what made up our songwriting was talking about, the sounds and smells of the Australia that we knew. Right. That's like little towns that are having a bypass being, built, and what's going to happen to that town. Mm-hmm. That's some sort of observation of, Australian diggers before they leave for, some war zone. That's some, that's an environmental song, a song that touches on this kind of bubbling, simmering, boiling, pace that we're moving towards the destruction of the planet around us. Like, there's a lot of criticism, there's a lot of celebration, there's a lot of observation, there's a lot of who we really were. So I reckon if you look at the Herd's catalogue, you might not. It doesn't sit in the realm of hit makers and real classic Australian bands, but I reckon there's not one other band that's like us.
I agree. Were you good at school as a kid and through in high school and stuff?
No, not at all.
Why not?
I failed.
What do you mean you failed?
Oh, I failed just the TER.
Oh, yeah. Because that's what it used to be called, a TER. It's not TER.
Yeah, whatever, ATAR or whatnot. But all of us, our generation, was just like, oh, whatever it is now,
What was high school like for you?
Just skating, actually.
Really?
Yeah, skating and playing sport, but really fucking around. Like I had a heap of depression when I was about 16, 17. Okay. And when I was 18 or 17, turning 18, that was like all the big year 12, the tests and everything. And I was rebuilding my self-esteem then. So I was fucking around in class. I was wagging. I was jigging classes. I was going and, we had a crew that was mainly skating and also had guys that I went out tagging with. So it wasn't a whole lot of schoolwork. And, a lot of my year 12 was spent skating with a bunch of my friends up in the mountains.
Has there been any academia since?
Yeah, I kind of, and this is an interesting thing. I was talking to some friends about it last night. I've had a few different interventions in a way by people, usually women, that have, I think, changed the course of my life a little bit. So this is going to sound funny, but the first girlfriend that I had at that time was also a little bit more conservative than me, and her influence on me kind of created a little bit more ambition in what I could do. And she played a role in socializing me. And I mean, I was already social. I mean, I didn't need help, but her role was to kind of start to be a good influence in a way, just show a bit more discipline, drive. She was much more academically focused than me. So I look back on that relationship as being a way of settling what I was in at that time. And I look on it positively. I'm not like, I really need someone to sort me out. It wasn't like that at all. It was just that I can acknowledge that it had a positive impact on me. Right. So yeah, that got me going to TAFE, and I went and studied in TAFE, and I got into uni. Then I finished the uni degree. Didn't do anything at all with the uni degree because it was public relations and advertising. And I started working on Elephant Tracks, and honestly, I've been working there ever since.
Yeah, followed the dream, followed the passion. Because I mean, I sort of feel the same about my degree, although it is very specific to what I do now. But I didn't go to university until I was 24, 25, you know, so I had that period of time of just going, like, lost what am I doing with my life. But very integral to my personal development as well. I don't regret it. And I feel like it doesn't matter what you study almost. I feel like at that level, it is really assisting with the depth of analysis you go into things, and it does take it to another level with your writing and the way you critically think. And I think it really resonates in your storytelling and your songwriting, you know. I mean, do you keep up with any literature of any sorts? Because, like, I mean, again, the reason I'm saying these things is because I feel, and I can tell, you're very well spoken, your lyrics are very intelligent. Do you still read literature and stuff like that?
Yeah, I feel torn about having intelligent lyrics, you know, because a lot of music that I love is not intelligent. It's like emotionally intelligent, right?
Okay.
As opposed to being clever. I think sometimes clever songwriting is so overrated, you know. You don't need to have a clever bunch of words that sound smart, you know. If you can, because that's nothing compared to the value of feeling. So getting back to that feeling thing, if you know how to channel feeling, that is like power.
For sure.
And that is that's amazing. If you can be smart enough to communicate an idea in a song, that's okay. That's good, you know. And I think that's sometimes the area that I'm better at. But I admire and I'm envious of feeling. That's what I'm always looking for now.
Dude,
Yeah.
I did not expect that response.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah, look, spoken well, yeah, sometimes I mean I ramble a lot. But I reckon sometimes the higher education or being committed to something, it's just another way of instilling a bit more self-worth.
And as an educator myself, I want to jump in and say, like, doesn't necessarily mean university is the pathway.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people feel like that they have to do it. And in a lot of ways, our country traps people in that system financially, and I think it's disgusting. But you can higher educate yourself by other means and independently, and you're not dumb if you don't, you know, achieve access to it. Like they promote through the HSC, you know, I see so many young people going through our public system and not meeting the outcomes that were prescribed by the government, and they're not getting, you know, this result that's going to give them access to higher education, and just left literally believing they're dumb. And then that knock-on effect affects their self-confidence for years, and it holds them back. And it's really it's quite upsetting and devastating, you know. So I know for me, it took me. I was one of those people.
Yeah.
Anyway,
well, I reckon I've been affected in the same way.
You think so?
In that I failed school. I was never academically that successful. So,
but did you feel like a failure?
Yeah, I did feel like a failure for a while there. I just felt like that wasn't for me. I felt like that was for other smart people.
Gotcha.
But of course, going through life now, I also came off the back of it with a bit of public profile, and my artistic career meant that sometimes my old school friends, congratulations, you're one of the ones that got out. That's a comment that I get a lot. You got out of the mountains, you know, because most of our year failed, and there was not an expectation of academic excellence at our school. That was not instilled in us. There was no expectation put on the kids. So naturally, we didn't think that we had a future there. So I reckon that, you know, when you're having those conversations, you know it's ridiculous. You know that you never got out of anything. But in their eyes, that's something that there's a bit of pride in the perception of that happening. And so you don't want to take the piss and tell people that they're wrong. But at the same time, you know, in your own world, you got your own unhappiness, you got bills you got to pay, struggling with different things. But you also, when I think about, you know, that idea of coming out of a place, or I don't look back and go, oh, right, okay, so you really do need to be a pretty successful kind of academic in order to have a successful life. Like those two things are really like they're not connected in the ways that particularly young people are led to believe or we walk out of school with. So I don't really think about my academic background as being that important.
It's true. It's nice to hear. I think too much importance is put onto it. So it's good.
Well, the NAPLAN, is that the NAPLAN?
Yeah,
the test that they give kids?
Yeah, year 7 and 9.
Yeah,
and in the primary school as well.
Primary school, yeah. My daughter did it, I think, last year, right?
How old is she, if you don't mind me asking?
Almost 11.
11, okay.
And I talked to my partner about it. Like, do we care? I mean, no, we don't really care. I've always tried to remember, don't worry too much about these things. But as a parent, it's different. The parent, all of a sudden, you want to make sure that your kid's going okay, right? These are things that are natural, and every parent's different. But I've not looked at that NAPLAN result because I don't want to even get caught up in that world of going, cool, my kid's kind of like she's ticking all these boxes, it's working out. I just don't want to put that as like I know I'm calmed because of these results reflecting my, hopes for my kid. But my partner's different. She's like, oh, great, this is good, and I am not judging her at all. I don't want to look at those results because I want to just sort of see that the kid's happy, she's inspired by things. We're kind of moving in good directions. Cool, sweet.
Yeah. I'm definitely conflicted about it. I mean, I do understand what they're trying to do with it, identifying strengths and weaknesses to help them progress and improve how they differentiate their kids' learning so they can support them better. But most parents just get hung up on the number, their grade. They're not going deeper than that. They're like, oh, my kid's at this level.
Yeah.
They are just, that's what they're a C grade, student. And what freaks me out is that then the student thinks they're that, and then they're going to have C grade dreams.
Yeah, absolutely.
And intelligence is so much more than that. And that's why I just believe like every individual possesses a variety of strengths and weaknesses, and we just need to nurture the individual and build them up as much as possible. I think school should be a place for building the individual up and building their confidence up as high as possible.
Yeah, connecting with people.
Connection, relationships.
It's really true. I mean, I've got to be real clear about that NAPLAN story in that I don't know what I'm talking about. I got to acknowledge that like maybe I should go and check them and just sort of be aware of them, but this is connected to who I am as a person. Like when I grew up, that was not something that I ever wanted to define me. Oh, I'm doing well in school, so therefore, that's not something that for me as a parent, it may be this one of those kind of psychological things about your own self-awareness that manifests as like, oh, I'm just not even going to worry about that. That's just my shit around that. But I do remember a good mate one time talking about, and he's a wise fella, and he was talking about how people come from all sorts of different disadvantage, and some people come from great privilege, and the world is full of a million different problems, and there is a different million solutions for those problems. And the people that come from all sorts of different versions of privilege or disadvantage are all uniquely, whether by DNA or by nurturing, built to be able to solve different problems, and there is a space for everyone.
Yes.
And if you've gotten a really difficult upbringing where you do not have any of the comforts and you are psychologically scarred for life and how it feels like a sentence, you're still a person that is going to just tick differently to that person next to you, and there is a space for you specifically somewhere in the world. And, I think it's a really good thing to come back to, because no matter how hard things are or good, it doesn't make you any better than another person to be able to solve a particular thing. You just got to find it.
Yeah. Like you have value and purpose.
Yeah.
And the way things happen for you are unique, and someone out there needs to actually utilize it or hear it the way it happened for you so they can identify.
Yeah. You got that lived experience. That means that even without all of the intellectual box ticking that comes with your upbringing, you're better placed to know how to solve that problem. And then that intellectual, bloody rich person, you know, like you are, like you have the advantage.
So who said that? You don't
Well,
remember?
I'm kind of.
I don't have to tell us.
I'm paraphrasing because you know I'm sort of embellishing and making it make sense for me. But it was. I'm pretty sure it was Kenny.
Friend of yours, okay.
Kenny Sabir, founder of Elephant Tracks, one of my best mates.
Right, dude. You've collabed a lot over the years. Who would you say? I mean, some significant artists, some rad artists. Like, who would you say was one of the most? Oh no, actually, no. I guess I'll rephrase the question because I don't want you to single anyone out. But I mean, how do these collaborations improve you as an artist?
I collaborate because I'm limited. I collaborate because I don't have that many skills.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah. Collaborations allow me to.
That's humble.
Nah, it's just true. I collaborate because I can't sing that well. I collaborate because I can't really produce music to a level that would be good enough. I chose a long time because I wrote a bunch of beats in the herd, but I chose a long time ago. I'm just not going to even go there because I wanted to focus more on you know my songwriting and my lyrics. But yeah, the collaborations give me an opportunity to draw on strengths of others, and you do that for too long, and it becomes frustrating because you become stifled. Because everything becomes committee-based, you know? Everyone's making decisions, you can't take control. So sometimes you go back to just sort of more singular creative vision. And that always takes me back to working with people. I think that in my solo career, I probably more often tended to control things and bring people in and invite them. But sometimes I've really had a very open book on collaborations and they've just come in and done stuff.
Yeah.
But even I would say where I've written the lyrics and brought someone in, you know, that's the other understanding of songwriting to me is that I learned later on in my career is that there's an ego hit from writing everything, but just the voice alone and the transcendent way that a voice can change some lyrics or like one lyric to being to making you feel this to another thing, which is like, you know, elation or, you know, it speaks to you in a way that is impossible to sum up in just like words. The voice can do that. And so sometimes it's like the collaboration it's more about the fact that there's this transcendent presence on the song that has lifted it into this whole other place I could never have taken it.
Yeah. Oh, right. I'm so glad I asked you that question. And look, without overlooking anyone, and I know each one is a unique experience, but like, can you highlight some like remarkable collaboration experiences you've had? Would you mind?
Yeah, I think that one of them has been with, you know, it's not like your Paul Kellys or Kira Peruz or those types of artists. Like even Sampa the Great was amazing because she's just great, right? But Pip Norman is a producer that I was lucky enough to stumble into his orbit very early on in the Herds touring. He was in a group called TZU.
TZU?
Yep, and that was not really by design, but we just sort of fell into it. He's written on every single record of mine now.
Has he?
And he has this emotional intelligence and this understanding of the craft. He can be like a music whisperer, but he also has very technical abilities. But the collaborations with him have taught me so much about life.
Okay.
He also he has that uncanny ability, which happens in the studio, where it looks just like a normal singer's in front of the microphone. But what's actually happening in that moment is that there's a high wire act, and the vocalist is balancing on that high wire of confidence and not knowing and just feeling like they can't do it, you know. And so that can be like, oh no, I can't do that take the way it's supposed to be, and that thing. Sometimes it's like. It could go at any moment. He's one of those people that is able to read that room and say to the artist, that thing that understands what they're going through and just brings them down off that high wire a bit. And I reckon over the years I've done that a bunch of times, just like you just feel like it's the hardest thing in the world, but all you're doing is just putting a verse down. Like there's nothing hard about it, but you just create it in your mind.
So interesting.
Yeah, so he's a really amazing collaborator.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, I think if it comes down to, other guest vocalists and stuff, I really loved working on Long Loud Hours with Bertie Blackman. Right. Because that song's an interesting one in that I got her into the studio for his other song, Rushing Through Me, on this record I put out in 2016. And just at the end of the session, we said, we got this other song, Long Loud Hours. I was doing all the vocals. Would you be up for doing some backing vocals? And she was like, yeah, sure, all right, yep, cool. And she's just like someone I really love as a person, but also as a collaborator. She's an incredible collaborator. Artistic mind, and her old man is a famous Australian artist. And I wonder, I sometimes am like, you've been around art your whole life. So this is you as a person. I haven't been around art all my life, but we connect on a level of like these things matter to us, So I'm like, I love the way that she thinks. Anyway, she just dropped those vocals, just put them down, and you can't imagine that song without her because the tone that she has, and that song was a perfect example of the way that a vocalist can make a song become transcendent from what it was before. And, that was always amazing because, she was only doing backing vocals, but everyone's like, she's the entire song in a lot of ways. Yeah. Not the entire song, but you know what I mean? Like that's the emotional rush of the song is when she comes in.
So good, man. So good. So what do you reckon's next for you from here?
This is a big one. Yeah, look, it's a time of change. There's a lot of change going on.
You feel it?
Yeah, it's dramatic. It's affecting everyone in an artistic sense, but I'm sure it's affecting people in a broader sense too. And I'm excited. I think I've been running Elephant Tracks for 22 years.
Amazing.
And we, through that time, have left I know we've left a legacy. And, I'm doing a podcast at the moment where we're interviewing a whole bunch of people and talking about what that means to people. And it's emotional because you realize that, everyone's too busy to reflect on it as it's happening. But when you stop and look at it, you realize you've, meant something to a bunch of different people, whether they be artists or audiences. And I am looking forward to taking a deep breath and not being on that constant and relentless, that quest to put food on the table the next night, And so just taking a bit of a breather from that is what I'm looking forward to. But I'm still, really excited by art in general and music in general and how to kind of conquer the great problems that have been thrust upon us with this technological changes, with changes to the way people listen to music and the patterns and the habits of people. There's a huge amount of problems to solve for people who love the value of music. There's a lot of stuff and it's not necessarily my problem to solve either. I think a lot of young people are going to come up with the solutions for it. But I would love to support them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I want to go down this like trajectory, but I am curious. I mean, I did write this down actually because I was curious to, to talk about your feelings like on streaming platforms and actually, this modern era of music consumption. Okay, I pay for a Spotify subscription.
Yep.
I'm not buying albums anymore.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to sound ignorant either. I'm really not from a music industry background, so I'm just coming from like average Joe perspective, who's just an appreciator.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Like, okay. What would you say to the average consumer if they want to keep supporting music industry and especially local music? What would you suggest to them as the best method for doing so?
Go out to gigs.
Okay, there it is. Boom.
I reckon supporting in that way, I know that there's a lot of Band-Aid solutions, go buy the record or whatnot, but Well, you listen to streaming services because it's convenient, you know, and nothing that any artist says to try and, you know, change your mind is going to change that fundamental convenience in your life. I'm the same. We all do it. And the reason it's so popular is because it's so great for us to be able to access this music. Does it actually broaden your musical horizons? I think that's one of the surprising things about having access to everything. You think that it's going to make you listen to more of a wide variety or be exposed to new stuff. The opposite happens.
Exactly.
You know, and that's one of the things that is plaguing our industry at the moment that we need to work out is like, well, what does it even, I mean, not even that I care that much about charts, but what does it mean for the charts when there's 14 Taylor Swift albums in there, or sorry, songs in there, and Fleetwood Mac has 4 songs because, you know, it went viral on some ad campaign. What value is there to the replenishment of culture if these things that were supposed to open everything up have a complete opposite effect? So I'm not going to sit here and tell people that they should buy more records or whatnot, because I don't believe that those things are genuine solutions to a problem when that problem sort of has been solved by streaming. But there is things that has to happen. There's policy changes that mean that if we've got a totally backwards reflection of what's popular music, so it's just all old catalog records from the 70s and this, that, and the other. Well, do we care about new artists coming through? Like, there's no future to the music industry if you don't continuously replenish. It's like a football team, you know. What's the point of having all these veterans there and just continuing to play because they've got name recognition? Nah, that doesn't happen. You've got to bring in new blood. Then they get a name. Then they become your favorite player. Like that, it happens naturally in sports. It doesn't happen naturally in music.
But how does the new blood get exposed?
Well, these are the problems that need to be solved. It's like if we just measure the most popular things, well, we have to accept that the way that streaming services have changed people's listening habits, and maybe it hasn't changed people's listening habits. We're just more privy to it now. Like maybe you always just listen to Fleetwood Mac, but now it's being measured because you're listening to it on Spotify or you listen to it on Apple, whatever. So these are the things where you have to, as an industry or as people who are behind the scenes who are in positions of power, they have to kind of work out, well, if it's important that we find a new way for a new Newcastle artist to come through and have a pathway, well, we've got to address that. So I think that there is a part of everyone's involvement in culture that's part of it. But if you create the main channels for how you listen to music, then the genuinely so good for the consumer, then the answer isn't going, you should be wrong for doing that. There should be just better and more creative and innovative ways to make sure that culture continues to have a relevance and it keeps moving and keeps reflecting people. Otherwise, all we're going to have is monoculture. All we're going to have is just Taylor Swift records and old classic records, and nothing will genuinely reflect who we really are. And it doesn't have to be popular in order for that to happen, but it has to exist, and you have to have a way to find it.
Yeah, and it's taking the element of investigation away. These streaming service algorithms are creating echo chambers.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean, again, I'm coming from a completely uneducated, but this is observational. And yeah, like I see the suggestions I get, and it's the same genres or close to what I was always. But then, because you have these massive artists, as the ones you've mentioned, because they become like the golden goose, they'll still insert that into your suggestions because is there truth to what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's be careful what you wish for, because on a level, you'll get people who deal with this on a real shallow level, and they'll be like, yeah, well, if it's popular, that's what it should be. You know, that's what people want. And you go, okay, cool.
I think there's more control there.
No, I mean that the way that the algorithms of these streaming platforms work, and the fact that they need to keep on getting paying subscribers means that they can't just sit there and be, acting out of principle. They're not sitting there thinking, what's an important kind of way for us to play a role in the cultural policy of a country? What is the best way that we can support culture to exist and thrive, right? And be a living, breathing thing. That's one thing. Another thing is, how do you make a buck? How do you keep the business going? Those two things are fucking different. priorities, right? And so, you can never kind of rely on private sector or businesses to be making the holistic decisions. They only have to be seen to be sort of like just doing enough. And I think it's a rare time right now where you've come up against like this time where all these things were supposed to answer all of those problems, and they actually haven't. And so if it's important to find the next Paul Kelly or find the next Hilltop Hoods or Warrumpy Band or whatever, then you're gonna have to deal with this at some point.
Be easy to get jaded.
Yeah, for sure.
But you don't seem jaded. Nah. I feel like you could be jaded if you wanted to be, if you 100%. Chose to be.
I've spent probably the last 10, 15 years actively pushing against being jaded. Because like one part of being jaded is being entitled to it being your way, right? That's really what it is being, this is not working the way it should be.
I give up.
I'm entitled for this to be working better for me. So I'm really pissed off, and I'm feeling like I have not been served enough for my fucking own personal sense of entitlement. That's what that is, 100%. So when you're jaded, there's a little bit of sooking, a sadness going on. And jaded is also part of the unfairness of systems. And so you feel you feel like you are powerless to change it. So therefore you just give up. You're a bit jaded. So sorry, I don't want to paint everyone who's jaded as being a sook. That's 100% not true. But that is part of entitlement. And so I've always tried to I think part of it is also just going, well, these things are happening. So we're not trying to just complain about the fact that they're happening. Where's the constructive part of this, And sometimes you're going to fluctuate with the level of energy you have for that problem. And other times you're like, yeah, come on, let's go. Let's get it.
And you love creativity and music that much. That's what's motivating you to try to evolve with it and evolve with the more political aspect of it.
Yeah, definitely. That's all they're all variables that's so far out of my control that that's 100% where I think there's so much room to move.
But are these the conversations you're having with some of the artists that you sign?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, I think there are – it's like the classic thing. Like I went to the ARIAs a whole bunch of times until thinking that the whole thing was a sham. I don't think the ARIAs is a sham for anyone in the industry that is listening. However, my own expectations of that event became more realistic over time. And so I would try and instill what my learnings were with younger artists, including that if you have invested all of the purpose of your creative self into a shiny medal, don't be surprised that when you get that shiny medal, it's not what you think it is. And so therefore, maybe the purpose of your creative being was always a stitch up if you had to be validated by awards. Awards are they can never sum up the meaning of art. It's crazy to think of this as a competition. Like you can have a competition where you run 100 meters against somebody else. Cool, sweet. You've done heaps of training. You can measure that. You can't measure 2 songs. You can just measure what's most popular or whatnot, or who has the most votes. If you got a lot of votes in the hat, you're probably going to have a higher chance of winning.
And who's voting? That's the thing too.
For sure. So I think that those things are harder to explain to a young artist.
Yeah.
I can sit there and go, you know what, this isn't what you think it is. And then sit there and go, yeah, we know, but we really want to go to the ARIAs.
To put a positive spin on it, do you feel like the ARIAs are still a good way to celebrate culture?
Yeah, for sure. They have a role. Yeah, they definitely have a role in an industry sense and that kind of marketing. And getting back to explaining that to a younger artist, it's not for me to tell them that it's wrong to hold an award ceremony up as an aspirational part of their career, because that can be really motivating.
Yeah.
And it's not for me to sit there and go, I've done it. It's not what you think it is, so don't worry about it. They have to go through it and learn themselves.
Yeah.
And you have to accept that too, that you may be right, but it's not right for them to listen to you.
Okay. Oh, dude, so good. So you're excited about the future?
Oh, yeah,
you're excited.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
I'm so glad to hear it. To be honest, when I thought about it, I was wondering if you'd come here with like a lot of just negativity around the industry because I can see like it's tricky.
Oh, yeah. I think there's a difference between being negative and being realistic. I think that a lot of the time our industry is toxic confidence. You know, it's confidence at all costs. It's always projecting success. And anything less than that is giving in, because if anyone else sees that lack of success, then they're certainly not going to give you an opportunity. So you've got to continuously be like, yes, I'm so successful. You have to work with me. You have to give me these offers. I can't ever tell you that I'm not doing well. And that's really unhealthy.
Yeah.
So being able to be honest about that is different from being negative.
Yeah.
And I think that I definitely have moments for feeling pretty fucking negative, to be honest.
I guess the good news is you can always fall back on your AFL career.
I mean, you know, playing
so right.
non-competitive AFL footy as a mid-40s person is, you know, is already dangerous enough.
And how old are you? Tell everyone how old you were when you started.
Oh, I was like mid-30s. I was like 36 when I first started kicking footy.
Like, what prompted that decision? Because like it's a pretty dangerous sport injury-wise for someone in their mid-30s, early 40s.
Yeah, funnily enough, the reason I started playing AFL was this Perth rapper called Hunter. Now, he was a really pretty inclusive but hardcore rapper from WA, part of the Syllabolics crew. And he was always really embracing of the herd and really loved what we did, loved 77%. And he was one of the few staunch rappers that was really like fully enthusiastic about us, fully connected with us, was a really good guy. Never forgot it. He contracted cancer and he passed away, you know, well before his time. Pretty tragic, but there was a football game that was held to raise money for Canteen and I guess to support the family, and that was the first real game of AFL I played. I kicked the footy like a soccer player. I shanked everything, had no idea about technique, but it opened a door. And so funnily enough, I love playing AFL now. Like I love it. I play it with multiple teams, just whoever will take me for training sessions. I've built some really good friendships off the back of it. I've learnt a lot, and I've learnt a lot because it's really humbling trying to learn such a physical sport when you're past your physical peak. So it's not about winning for me. It's more about like I just want to play as many minutes as I can before my body gives up on me. That's literally what I'm doing. And yeah, I love it, and I trace it all back to Hunter.
Rad, man. That's such a rad backstory. And I think too, because I'm in this same phase with skateboarding, like I've been doing it my whole life, but it's dangerous and you can get hurt easy.
Yeah.
And I'm late 40s, but I'm just kind of like, I'm just going to push this for as long as I can, because if I stop now, I'll never restart. And I guarantee that's the same with you with AFL. The day you stop, you're not going to restart in your 40s.
It's you
know. And so, but what it does with me, it prompts me to live better in other aspects of my life. It makes me go to bed earlier. It makes me drink more water. It makes me eat better.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't drink. I haven't drunk alcohol for 11 years, but or do drugs. But so it's prompting me and inspiring me. So it's like, you know, and like I've hit this phase in my late 40s of like more inspired than ever.
Yeah.
And you know, and my angle and my approach to it is different. So, and I can relate to what you're saying with AFL.
I get that totally. I mean, there was a social group that I played with. They really were important for teaching me the game and teaching me the techniques. And they just do circle work, which is just running around a field, kicking the ball to each other, handballing, marking, learning. And it was a really great environment. Met a lot of friends from it. But they, at one point, went from 10 a.m. on a Sunday morning to 9 a.m. And so, you find yourself changing a little bit about what you're doing on Saturday nights, because then you start taking it more seriously. That's not winning. That's not kicking goals, but that's just like personal improvement. And then you start noticing how much harder it is if you've had a night on the piss or something. And so then you start thinking like on a Saturday night, I don't want to have compromise on a hard lead, you know? I want to be able to run and take that mark.
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting. And also another one that I thought of relating to what you're saying is like, I was saying that I skated when I was a kid, right? And one of the skateboarders that was part of our crew is Dustin Dolan.
I was going to say he's from Blue Mountains.
Yes.
I was actually going to bring it up. I thought, no.
Yeah.
You remember Dustin?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't maintained a close friendship with him over the years, but I see him a bunch of times. Like, he's really good mates with Dubs from Hermitude, and I manage Hermitude. So, you know, when we've been in the States doing different business or touring there, you know, Dustin will give Dubs a call and he'll talk. He'll be telling some story. You know, like he'll be on the phone to Dubs and sitting there saying, "Oh yeah, Monk Ronson's at the house. Come over." You know, it's another world, right? But Dustin has like dedicated himself to his sport on a level that not like the common person doesn't understand. Like, we're talking concussions in his 40s, like throwing his body around, and on a level that's like reckless. On another, it's, you know, if you remove the recklessness from it, you see the absolute dedication to a life's work, even if that looks a little bit psychotic. And, you know, doing things to your body that you should not be doing at that age. And, you know, he's you know, that's what he's dedicated his entire life to, that thing. And, you know, I don't.
Are you aware of how culturally significant he is to skateboarding globally?
Yeah.
He's from the Blue Mountains.
Yeah.
He has, because it was more than just his amazing ability on a skateboard, but I mean, the way he marketed himself and unconsciously marketed himself.
Yeah. By
being as real as you can be, just literally being himself. And I'd really actually love you to listen to his podcast he did with this skateboarding podcast called The 9 Club. And you'd find it's based in America, but it's literally 2 hours of him talking about his life growing up. And most of it is about his experiences in the Blue Mountains.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize how gnarly the Blue Mountains were in terms of, like, it sounds like it was a pretty tough place, pretty raw actually.
It's funny. It's a weird mix.
Is it? Yeah. In the era that he was there, you know, 90s and stuff. So. Yeah. You might find some identification.
Yeah, I mean, we used to just skate at the council chambers, and you know.
And you remember Dustin as a little kid?
Oh yeah, for sure. Because he was a few years younger than us, and the thing that happened then, we had a few good skaters, not pro skaters, but good skaters, and Dustin was one of them. But Dustin was the youngest, and he was really little. Mm-hmm. So the things that he was doing looked phenomenal because he was so small. And, you know, I remember when he played the Big Day Out, I think it was the first year Silverchair played the Big Day Out, right?
I was there.
Yeah, a massive one. And I remember being in the crowd and, you know, everyone was just freaking out. Who's that little
He's skating
kid
in the street course at the back of where Silverchair were playing outside the SCG.
Yeah. And he was doing crazy things.
Yeah.
Now, at that stage, he was a good skater, and he's obviously had this appeal. But there's something obviously so much greater about what he had within him, because you don't just go overseas by yourself and swim. You know, that is a scary way to live your life, is to dive in fully in the deep end. And it's clear that his personality, and once again, like, you know, I had my formative teenage years hanging out with him. I'm not Dustin's best friend. So I feel like I'm not the person to talk about this, and I don't feel right to talk about it.
That's cool.
But from a distance, I think he's one of those people that brings people together.
Yeah.
And I think there's something charismatic about his personality that makes people maybe not want to do it, but just do it. And I think that probably is some element of why he's become such a widely reputed and celebrated skater.
Yeah, and it ties in with what you were saying earlier. I mean, he's actually not a naturally gifted skateboarder.
Right.
He wasn't gifted some X factor talent. He just was obsessed.
Yeah.
And skated from feel, and then had to be creative in his approach and the tricks that he did to match his ability. And then that created this unique approach.
Yeah. And I know that crew that we had skating, like, there was no fucking frills. Like, there was no fancy, you know, people with backgrounds that, you know, like parents are building them nice facilities, or there was like advantages. It was just like, there was just working class shit, like jigging class, drinking cheap wine, and just thrashing, like just going hardcore. That was us. So I'm not surprised that there was this tenacity that he had to come out of that space. And I reckon
like it.
Most of the skaters were all older than him in our crew as well.
Gotcha.
So that's probably a factor.
Yeah. Like when I heard the stories about the Blue Mountains, I was like, yeah, like I guess, he talks about, this big, massive drinking culture and quite violent and drug problems,
Yeah.
like a lot of all those social issues that seem to happen in the outskirts and the rural areas. So,
Yeah, well, I was talking to a friend last night about this. Like when we were growing up, it was like mid-90s and there was alcohol. It was all goon. That's what it was. And
Cheap.
mushies.
And mushies.
Mushies, yeah. And it was also, there was a fair bit of weed around, but it was after that time that the heroin came in. And there was a lot of ODs and there were a lot of people lost.
And then we kind of missed the ice stuff.
Yeah.
Even after that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But the mountains seem to have been pretty, held to ransom by heroin for a while.
Do you think it's like that combination of like low employment opportunities, not a lot of money, boredom?
Yeah, like I said, like in our school, there was no expectations of us up there. So when I said the mountains is a weird mix, there's a lot of wealthy people up there.
Yeah.
And it's real white,
Is it?
There was a small Asian population, but it was really, it really felt like a pretty white place. In retrospect, of course, as a kid, you don't really think about these things till you move out and you're like, oh, what the hell? Where am I now? In Campsie or Bankstown or something? Like, this is real different. But the mountains were like that. But at the same time, there was a lot of real working class, and there was a real undercurrent, like a darker undercurrent in the mountains for sure.
Yeah.
And there's all these hippies as well, so it's a weird mix.
I mean, aesthetically and geographically, it's so beautiful, man.
Beautiful.
Insane.
I still consider it my home, even though I haven't lived there since 1999. I reckon.
Well, and then you end up in Campbelltown.
Sorry, that was where I was born.
Born in Campbelltown, Blue Mountains,
Yeah.
Sydney, and now?
Now Wabakul country.
Wabakul country.
Yeah, I'm up
There
here
you
in
go.
Newcastle.
Can you see yourself staying for a long time?
Well, the funny thing about being here is that I've never thought that I could have a future where I was on the coast. I don't know why. I've never been on the coast, but I love it. I love the sun. There's white skin. I have to take care of it, but a lifetime of getting burnt. But there's something about it that's really alluring for me. So the idea of learning how to surf and being near the water is still this sort of version of myself that I didn't think I could have. So I'm pretty excited about it. I love it up here. And Newey's always been real good to me anyway. Like ever since we started touring, Newcastle's always sort of been a second home.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Is that because there is a strong music scene up here?
Yeah, I don't know. The Newey took to the herd like nothing else.
Yeah, dude.
Far out. I don't know what it was, but we used to pack shows out here and the crowd would be absolutely up for it.
What
and
venues? Like pubs?
Like
Or
the
just festivals?
Leagues Club, sometimes we played like the Metro in Sydney, which like 1,000 people, 1,100. And you come up to Newey, we play like 1,400 people. But it was the Cambo, it was the Star.
At Cambridge Hotel, yeah.
Yeah, it was the Uni, the bar on the hill. Like we kind of did all these venues in Newcastle. It was just something about this place. Like they just really we connected with them. They connected with us.
I'm finding it a really interesting place. Like there's something in the water up here. Like again, I'm coming from the skateboarding angle. There's just so many amazing skaters up here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not really a big city with heaps of like skate spots. And in fact, in terms of skate parks, it's got like nothing that great. Although they are building one on the main beach that's not finished. And then like musicians that I'm meeting, just really passionate. And because I work at a performing arts high school, a lot of the people there are involved in the local music scene. And one guy was telling me like per capita of population, this place has more live music venues than any other city in Australia. Like, granted, they're probably nurturing, but like it's like the bars and the venues here want to support live music as much as possible. Whereas it seems like that's happening less and less in Sydney, especially. And I mean, I'm old enough to remember the advent of poker machines, and all of a sudden, like pubs stopped getting live music and putting the poker machines in and stuff like that. And
I read the other day that Australia, I think New South Wales has, like 0.003 of the world's population. Now that I'm getting this wrong, but has 37% of the world's poker machines. 37%.
For a population of 24, 25 million.
Now I'm gonna probably put my hand up and say that I probably got those facts wrong, but irrespective of the exacts, it's so disproportionate. So Sydney's a weird city. You think that it's all modern, but actually, like, there'll be things like the lockout laws.
Yeah.
That was in 2013 or 12.
Yeah.
That have eerie resemblance to, like the rum corps and like things that happen in like 1800s. There is aspects of the way that Sydney approaches culture and alcohol and like late night activities in general that make you realise that time is pretty closely connected, despite sometimes feeling like it's a million miles away.
I think it's those colonial themes still deeply ingrained.
Oh yeah, for sure, and also the conservative nature of trying to control people who are having a drink or having a party outside of hours.
And that's what I think. Like they control, and it's like treat us like babies or treat us like adolescents, and then it promotes more of that behaviour. Whereas like I was in Spain and like Barcelona, and it's like people drinking on the street, and I'm like with glass bottles, and I'm like, oh my God, he's drinking like a beer just openly on the street, and like they're like, yeah, and it's because they don't behave like that. It's not their culture.
That's it.
They would never think about like glassing someone in the face.
Yeah, we have a problem with alcohol and violence in this country that's different. It's not the same everywhere. And in England and places like that, yeah, sure, it comes up. And like all those countries have their own problems. It's like there's no one way of looking at, they've got it all worked out. But I tell you what, when it comes to alcohol and violence, a lot of those countries do have it fucking worked out. And they do have the ability to have a drink and not start going, hang on, what are you looking at? This sort of male aggression that comes out with alcohol is a problem that we have, and it's not normal. You don't have to have violence associated with being tipsy. It's not actually just one. Those two things are directly linked.
Yeah,
it's a cultural thing.
I think it is. I think there's been a cultural shift away from alcohol. I'm meeting a lot of young people who aren't into drinking. I was like, that's different to me.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Again, relating it to skateboarding, I see like young skaters, early 20s, and they're like clean living. I'm like, that was so different.
Yeah.
I was like, I had to smoke like 5 cones before I'd go skating, and then while I'm skating, drink a long neck in a paper bag.
Yeah.
And just like, they're not into it.
Yeah.
Although they do vape, which I find weird.
Yeah. I mean, it's a funny thing because, they'd have their own version of problematic behaviour, but it's not the same. But yeah, like it's funny. I was reading some comment the other day saying, if you drink too close to sleep, it's always going to damage your sleep. Like your ability to have good sleep is always going to be affected by how much alcohol you have and the proximity of when you have it to when you go to sleep.
Gotcha.
And I was thinking, fuck, we never had that language when no one was sitting there describe, like it's not a health thing. That's just a sleeping thing. Sleeping is a health thing, of course, but like, a lot of the stuff that we deal with now and the way that young people are kind of thinking about alcohol is because there's been a lot more language created around it that's actually gives you motivates you to make decisions as opposed to guilt as to why you shouldn't do it.
Oh, good point.
Right. Like it's like, I actually, I'm sort of like weighing up the pros and cons of this in a different way than if you were just saying you shouldn't do that, it's bad for you.
Yeah. I mean, you've been around bars and not in clubs for so much of your life. You would have probably seen an evolution of the change in the behaviour of the crowds and stuff like that, man. It's crazy.
Yeah, I reckon. I mean, it's for me, it's because I'm getting older, so the audience is getting older. You're getting more comments about like, got to go home because the babysitter's like knocking off, So I don't know if that's what you mean, but that's definitely become a bit more clear.
Okay, oh, you've seen that too. Yeah.
But no, you're right. Like people are drinking less.
Yeah.
And you know what? That actually has a weird problem for music too, because a lot of the structural kind of the scaffolding around how music exists is like in bars where they make their money off alcohol.
Yeah,
people are buying less alcohol. The business doesn't have as obvious way of turning a buck, so that affects the way that venues approach music. Yet again, it's not a red light. But it's a problem. It's got to be solved. It's going, okay, well, if the culture of how you see live music and you socialise with friends is changing, how do we adapt to that?
Good point. Yeah, I mean, I noticed at the Queens of the Stone Age the other night, which is like the first big gig I've been to since lockdowns, really. And yeah, it was just very tame. I don't know if it's because of the age range of people there, but even like when they started playing some of their heavier, sort of more upbeat, up-tempo songs, and right in the front of the crowd, they were starting to like move around more and whatever. And Josh Homme, even between songs, he's like, "Hey, like, just go easy. Don't bump into the ladies." Like, you know.
That's right. Yeah.
Anyway, but listen, man, it's been so epic. I might start winding it up.
Yeah.
But, you know, is there anything you want to end on? Is there any causes that you want to advocate for or just finish up on? Or
no causes. I'm just appreciative for the chat. Good to have a chat about things that touch on music, but also the deeper part of the way that we connect, and I guess like things that are important.
Yes, likewise, man. Hey, like, do you mind if I share your real name with the audience?
Sure.
Yeah, so Tim Levinson.
That's it, yeah.
So good. All right, Mr. Tim Levinson, everyone, a.k.a. Urthboy.